Sharon Horgan, you co-created Bad Sisters, about the Garvey sisters' attempts to eliminate their sister's abusive husband by any means necessary. It's based on a Belgian series. What did you think about that series when you first saw it?
Oh, I loved it very much. It's a completely different kind of show. But I loved the premise. I thought it was just inherently incredibly funny. And I love the sisters. The five actresses who played the sisters in the original are phenomenal. And yeah, I was a big fan. I mean, I certainly wasn't, in the market for writing a thriller or even doing an hour-long drama. I'd never done anything like that before, but I watched the pilot episode and I was in because I just thought I knew how to, do my version of that story. I kind of knew immediately what I would like to do.
And what were some of the changes you made to the story and the characters to fit into its new Irish milieu?
Well, I mean, just even setting it in Ireland sort of changed it immediately. I think fundamentally we just made it less broad. We sort of raised the emotional stakes and sort of made it less heightened. In the original, there was all sorts of crazy goings on. There was Chinese mafia and there was hitmen and people ended up in dog canning factories. There was a lot more murders and there was just a lot more bonkers. And I mean, it was part of its charm, but I felt like I wanted to lower the murder rate and sort of up the emotional damage. Like what would really happen to a bunch of sisters if they had to do something like this, and how would it impact on them personally, and how would it affect their relationships, and just sort of for the collateral damage to not necessarily be a pile up of bodies, but to their relationships and to themselves. And yeah, so that would be the main difference. And then Ireland kind of changed everything, really. It just kind of gave it a whole different, I know it's boring, everyone says it, but a different character. It's Ireland sort of changed a lot over the years, and it's become a politically very progressive country, but religion still plays a factor there, and as it does everywhere. But with the John Paul character being conservative and very religious, but also an outsider, it's very hard to break into Ireland, as my husband found out. So that sort of changed everything as well.
And the John Paul character is one of the most striking things about the show. It's a portrait of spousal abuse that's nuanced and subtle, and the way he does it is very insidious. What was it like writing that character? And because the whole series revolves around both the audience and the characters wanting him dead.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of the most fun and the scariest, because it's fun to write a villain, as it turns out. You can really go for it, but at the same time, it was keeping it sort of being respectful of the situation. We didn't want to get laughs out of domestic abuse. We wanted to represent what it really is to be in a relationship like that, and we were depicting a kind of abuse I hadn't sort of seen before, on that was a kind of coercive control and financial abuse and emotional abuse and isolating someone, and so all those things felt very nuanced and quite delicate, and yet we had this big kind of character. So it was in the writing, but also in the playing of it. He's a skilled comedian, but a really fantastic dramatic actor as well. And So it's just walking a bit of a tightrope, really. But I feel like we were sort of doing that throughout because, you know, we had to balance comedy with drama, like really silly, stupid comedy with really brutal drama. It was the trickiest part of it, and again, that was just something we had to keep an eye on throughout, you know, in the writing and in filming, and then in the edit afterwards, just to make sure that we got the balance right.
Was it also, you know, a challenge to keep, you know, sort of all of your story elements straight when you're, you know, going back and forth between so many different characters, and also you have two timelines? Like, did you maybe write the timeline separately and merge them together, or like how did that process work?
Well, actually, Marlon, who's the creator of the original, she did suggest that, you know, actually she kind of wrote them in the order of events sort of thing, but I couldn't really do that. And I wasn't able to crib as much from the original as I would have liked, because we took out so much story and put in so much of our own. So it was just a real pain. It was just I found it really hard, actually. And in fact, we sort of, a lot of what we wrote, there was multiple characters. It's a big ensemble, and you know, a lot of what we wrote didn't always end up making it in, because we kind of, you sort of realize, you know, in the later stages of writing, but also in the edit, how much you want to stay focused on the thriller, or how much, you know, you want to just focus on one sister per episode. So, you know, a lot of the domestic detail kind of got cut, but it felt, you know, it felt okay to do that. You know, we had a device that allowed us to go back and forth in time that was incredibly helpful, but even so, it was the biggest thing in the writer's room that someone would suggest a story beat, and we were like, no, that's in the past. You know, we were always in the wrong timeline. We were always suggesting situations that could never have happened because someone was either dead or, you know, wasn't around then. So it kept tripping us up, but it was a very fun device as well. It was nice to be able to you know, inform each of the timelines.
And just in that first episode, you know, The Prick, for which you are nominated for Best Episodic Drama at the Writers Guild Awards, in addition to the new series award. There's so much going on in that first episode. You have to introduce so much. Like what kind of challenge was that to you know, pack that many details into just 1 hour?
It was a huge challenge, and it's the episode that changed the most, and the episode that we spent the most time on. We had a completely different opening originally, before we sort of realized that, you know, we know these sisters and no one else does. I mean, no one even knows their sisters. You know, when you kind of come to an episode, first of all, you're like, who are these people? So, you know, it was that thing of wanting to direct the audience a little, whilst not, you know, insulting their intelligence. You know, we're back and forth in the past and the future as well, almost immediately. And I think it was just it was really the first 10 minutes that were the thing, you know, just making sure an audience wasn't asking too many questions, that, you know, that we were making them, we really wanted to entertain the audience. We knew that the series was going to be hard going in places, and you know, even in that first episode there was going to be some pretty brutal stuff. So we wanted to make sure that we allowed the audience to figure out what was going on, who were all these women, and then sort of, you know, kickstart the story of how they got there, you know, and what happened in the past. And yeah, it was, you know, we probably spent more on that first episode than we did on, you know, the next 4 combined, but it's tricky, you know.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your work on that episode and being nominated for that, specifically all the work that went into it. You know, your 2 Writers Guild Award nominations. It's been a pleasure talking with you about it.
Thank you very much.
Dan Erickson, you created, write, and produced the series Severance, about a world where technology can split your consciousness between your work life and your home life. First off, was there a lot of world building and conceptualizing that had to be done just at the very start of the process before even the story started taking shape?
Yeah, it was it was funny. It was a very it was a very long process. I'll say first of all, because I had been sort of shopping this idea around to various places before it landed on Ben Stiller's desk. And like the very first iteration of it, the script for which I think is like out on the internet somewhere, but it was much weirder. It was like a much more kind of insane Terry Gilliam-esque, world where there was a lot more kind of magical realism stuff happening. And over working on the script with my manager, with various people where I was shopping it, and then ultimately, of course, with Ben, we sort of honed in on the weird elements of the world that we really loved, and the parts of it that we wanted to be kind of surreal and heightened, and then the parts of it where we wanted it to feel more grounded, more human. Ben was always very adamant. He's like, I don't want to kill the weird. I don't want to kill the weirdness of it. But also I think that there is a very human, very relatable story to be told here within the confines of this kind of insane conceit, which I think, I like to think is a very distant science fiction concept, but I'm terrified that somewhere somebody's already trying to do it, having watched the show. So yeah, it was the world building was a huge part of it, and that was one of the hardest parts, but also one of the most fun.
And the reality of Severance gets more and more disturbing as the season goes along. From that initial premise and that first script, did the unsettling nature of being severed and all the implications of it, did that surprise even you as you were going along?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's part of the reason that it's a series and not a movie or like a weird, short, is that it is something that the more you get into the story and the more that you just sort of unpack what are the natural, logical consequences of this technology, like how would people use that? It just gets scarier and weirder and more upsetting. So, to create, optimum misery for our audience, we had to do it as a series. But it is something that, I feel like we've only scratched the surface in season 1 in terms of like how, disassociation and the desire to sort of disassociate from parts of our lives or parts of ourselves that we maybe don't like. It's such a rampant thing, in real life that there's just so many other ways to think about like how might people actually use this technology in the real world if it existed, and that provides almost endless story opportunities.
Yeah, it does feel eerily close to our current reality of corporate culture. Like, if not the technology, then the world in which that technology would exist. Like, for instance, I feel like Elon Musk would 100% use this.
Yeah, I've said Elon Musk is not allowed to watch this show, but I don't know if he's going to respect that wish.
Yeah. What do you think of how technology just in the real world has shaped the reality of work in general, and how does that sort of inspire you for the show?
Well, it's funny because we we wrote and were getting ready to make this show in a pre-pandemic world, and then COVID hit and we made it largely during the pandemic. And it was definitely something where I was thinking, like, as we were having writers meetings via Zoom and everybody's trying to figure out how Zoom works, it occurred to me for sure. I was like, are we making the most like comically, is this something that is going to be totally irrelevant by the time it comes out? Because we're basically making an office show at a time when offices appear to maybe be going extinct. And what I found was the case instead was, I think that because of Zoom and because of a lot of developments that have happened since the pandemic, it's actually, and social media and all these other things, like it's actually become much harder to define the work-life balance. And you can be working, you can do your work 10 feet away from where you sleep, and you're theoretically always reachable. And that I think it actually just made the questions that we were raising more relevant, although in a way that we didn't necessarily anticipate. So it's yeah, I mean, I feel like technology is always developing, and it's always eroding our boundaries a little bit, whether we want it to or not. And so I think that that's always going to be a relevant question.
And with this world you've created, growing and expanding over, time, going into, the second season, which you're working on, how far ahead have you plotted the show? Like, do you have ideas for it going multiple seasons, or, do you really kind of just take, it one season at a time?
I have a dartboard that I throw darts at, and it has plot points on it, and that's what we use. It's not planned at all. No, that's not true. We do have a plan. It's funny because this is my first rodeo in a way, in terms of this is my first time sort of creating a show and trying to sustain it over multiple seasons. So I've been trying to sort of hit that balance of, they say you can over plan, and become sort of beholden to a plan where you don't end up bringing out the most interesting elements of the show. But of course you can also underplan and find yourself kind of floundering and not knowing where you're going. So there's, I've had a sort of end game in mind the whole time we've been doing it, but there's a lot of different twists and turns it can take along the way, many of which we certainly don't have figured out yet.
The end plan that you have in mind, getting there is room for you to pivot as new ideas or avenues, interest you along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even it's happened already. It's like, the very first draft of the script, for example, I've said this, so I think I'm allowed to say this, and won't get in trouble, but it was originally Mark waking up on the table instead of Helly, and we were sort of following this new character who was showing up in this world. And there's just stuff like that where you talk through it and you're like, well, it's in a way it might be more interesting, if our main character has a history in this office and has a sense of a routine that's being upended by this new person showing up. So it's stuff like that where it's like you make the best plan you can, but then something comes along and either screws it up or makes it better, and you have to be open to both.
The show got 3 Writers Guild nominations, including one specifically for the finale episode, The We Are. Was it cathartic getting to pay off so much story? You're building obviously more questions, but getting to pay off a lot of stories and questions and ideas and anticipation in that episode.
Oh yeah, that was, that was it's funny, it's the shortest episode, and it's the episode that I did the fewest rewrites of. Like that script ended up pretty similar to the original first draft that I turned in. And I think that that's because we had, for all the other episodes, we're trying to sort of intricately build this scaffolding and make it really, make it all work and make it cool. But we always knew that we wanted that last episode to just be like tipping over a domino and just be like, okay, now we can just go. And it's going to be this very visceral, almost real-time experience that these innie characters are having upon waking up. And they're making these really messed up discoveries that we're making along with them. And so that was always the idea with that episode. And I'm just so glad it worked, because you never know in writing it. It's like, is this just going to be boring or strange? But yeah, it was so sad. Like, I remember when I saw the first cut of that episode, like finished, I was just like, yeah, that's exactly what we wanted. So it was cool.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your Writers Guild nominations and the success of the show. And, best of luck on season 2. Looking forward to seeing it when it's done.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Antonio Campos, you created, wrote, and directed The Staircase, which is based on the true story of novelist Michael Peterson, who was accused of killing his second wife. Now the story was previously told in a documentary series. What was your relationship to this case, and how closely did you follow it before making the series?
Well, my journey with it is a long one. It's a little unusual. Basically, I started working on this in 2008 or 9. I was sent the DVDs of the original doc series, which was 8 episodes, in December of 2008. And a producer had the rights, and he was asking if I was interested in adapting it into a feature. And I had just made my first feature at that time. And I watched it, and I knew nothing about it. And I was completely immersed. I mean, at the time, there wasn't anything like this, like where you would watch a documentary for 8 hours, where you would see every side of a case, an investigation, and see the sort of the whole thing unfold until the verdict. And so I was like, this is fascinating. This case is incredible. And what really grabbed me about Michael Peterson, and why I felt like he was such a great character to explore in a mystery, in a true crime story, was that he himself feels like an enigma. So he's like an enigma in the middle of this mystery, he's like a maze within a maze. And that just felt like a really great place to start. And then the other thing that grabbed me was that I was like, this is 8 hours. This was shot over the course of almost 3 years. The people who made this have to be characters. And you have to sort of, you have to understand the process of making the documentary. And then I thought, well, if you have to understand that, that becomes part of the storytelling. Like, what is the story that those people are telling? And you're looking at that narrative creation, and then you're looking at the defense forming their narrative, and you look at the prosecution forming their narrative, and you realize, oh, this is all about storytelling. And so, right away, it was like, oh, there's just so many ways of approaching this story that go beyond just the sort of interesting facts of the case that you experience through the documentary.
And you mentioned being approached for a potential feature film. How did it evolve into a limited series over the years? Obviously, you got involved at 2008, and then the story keeps going.
So it's just the way things go in Hollywood sometimes, which is, you start a project, and you really don't know where it's going to take you and how long it's going to take. If someone told me in 2008 that, just give it 10 years and you'll figure it out, you're gonna start making it. And so I know, but I was just so into it right away, and I started to develop it as a feature at one place, and they lost the rights, and then I became close with the filmmakers, and then took the rights to another place, set it up there, wrote it there as a feature. And then the story kept changing, because in 2008, he was in prison for life. That was the end of the story, Then by 2011, I'm working on my second draft of it, and it's like, oh wait, no. He is out awaiting a new trial. Like, he's been given a retrial. And it was like, well, then that's completely different. And he's now in a relationship with the editor of the documentary. It's like, okay, well, then that's a huge part of the story. So basically, the story kept getting more complicated. And then by 2015 or 16, I was like, this is a series. Like, this is never going to be a movie. And at that point, I had looked at it from every single angle. So when I got to sort of sort of trying to imagine it as a series, I had already looked at it from all different angles, and I kind of knew where everybody was at all times, and had explored it in different timelines. So then it was like everything kind of just came together when I started to think of it as a series.
And you mentioned, Michael being an enigma sort of at the heart of it. How tricky is it telling a story where the central character and the central mystery, there's no certain answer to it, that anyone but, obviously Michael Peterson knows for sure?
It's not tricky. You just have to you have to embrace it. And I like questions, and I like I like stories that leave me with questions instead of answers. And what we had to sort of identify was, well, this is a mystery, and there are things that we do know. There are things that we can answer. And so along the way, what are those mysteries that we're setting up that we can answer? And try and tell the audience in the storytelling that this is not a story that will give you that big answer. I think it was very clear when we start to explore different possibilities of how she died, that this is not a story that's necessarily going to give you one definitive answer. It's going to explore what could have happened, and in that sort of exploration, better understand the people and the dynamics here, and hopefully leave you with bigger questions about relationships, about dynamics, about people you think and then realize they might be somebody different, and why that is. So it was, in a lot of ways, I think it would seem like it's a hindrance, but if you embrace it, it actually makes for a much more interesting story.
And telling this story over the course of that spans 2 decades, must be kind of challenging from a structural perspective. Like, how did you develop the structure for the series?
Well, it's funny. When I was writing the pilot, I was upstate. I was trying to outline the pilot, and I was really I had the different pieces, but I didn't quite know how, and I knew I was going to play with different timelines. And I remember going on a run. A lot of times I get ideas running, and it's happened a few times where I've gotten ideas running to Enya, and I was running listening to Enya, and it really, the image of Michael in the mirror as an old man getting ready for court to take the Alford plea came to me as the opening, and I knew that then that would kind of come back at the very, that you would kind of reveal what that was. And I knew that at the end of the pilot, you would go back to that first shot, and you would meet Sophie, the mysterious French woman. And sort of having those bookends in the pilot, when I realized that, everything kind of started to fall into place. And I realized at that point, just like what was so important was just figure out where does each story start and where does each story end. And once I figured that out, it was like sort of trying to figure out how to, fill it in. And at that point, I figured out the pilot, I figured out the structure, and then I got to the writer's room with all these wonderful writers, and we started to sort of really get into the nitty-gritty of it all.
And what did you take away from the experience of writing and making this series in terms of like the workings of the legal system, the criminal justice system? What thoughts did you have about that coming away from this?
Well, I mean, it's hard not to be a little disillusioned with the way that things work, because what becomes very, very clear is that ultimately trials are just a competition for who's telling the better story, and not necessarily a search for the truth, which is what you think a trial is. I think, when you're sort of the naive idea of what a trial is, or your initial idea of what a trial is when you first hear about trials or watch a trial. And the idea that it's not necessarily a search for truth and just two sides competing to tell the better story, and then a jury deciding which story they like better. You start to feel like, well, there must be a lot of people telling better stories, but doing it in a way that covers up what the truth is, because a lot of what attorneys are doing is they're being very selective of what facts they put forth and what they kind of hold back, and it's the other side's job to bring those facts in. But what was clear is that in order to sort of really understand the truth of something, you really have to spend a lot of time. If you want to understand the truth of a case, you really have to understand both sides and look at it as objectively as you can, and make up your own mind. And you hope that that's what jury members are doing, and being very careful about how they review all the things that they've heard in testimony and evidence. But that's it. That the notion of storytelling is kind of what a trial is about, I think, was the sort of the big takeaway for me, and what I think the audience takes away from the show.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your Writers Guild nomination for the series, and all your work on it. And it's been a pleasure talking with you about it.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much.
Al Yankovic, you co-wrote the film Weird, the Al Yankovic Story, a sort of autobiographical parody of music biopics. It started out as a parody trailer more than a decade ago. How did you and the co-writer director Eric Appel go about building the film kind of around the bones of that trailer?
Yeah, we were essentially doing a feature film version of a 3-minute Funny or Die fake trailer, but we didn't want it to play as such. We didn't want it to feel like we're just expanding out this one joke to an hour and a half. So that was a real challenge to make sure that it felt like there were some real goals in terms of meeting the emotional intelligence of the piece, and making it feel like a real character-driven movie, and giving it moments that people would care about. Because it's ostensibly a comedy film, it's ostensibly a satire, but we wanted it to come off like we're doing like this big Oscar bait Hollywood biopic. That was the specific tone we were going for, and it was tough to achieve in the script. And Eric did an amazing job of making sure that we kept that tone in the movie. We just wanted to make sure that even though everybody was doing fairly ridiculous things throughout the course of the movie, it was played very, very straight. So we were trying to come up with a tone in the script that was true to the traditional Hollywood biopic, and yet it was a parody in a sense of those same biopics.
And despite being a parody, like it is the story of your life to a certain degree. Like how much of your life story is actually part of Weird, the Al Yankovic Story?
Oh, there are nuggets of truth throughout. It's based a bit in reality. We wanted it to ramp up in terms of its lack of verisimilitude. We wanted it to start out with people thinking, did this really happen? And then by the end of the second act, obviously, it's gone off the rails, but we wanted to take people on that journey. Part of me didn't want to promote the movie that much, because we didn't want to let the cat out of the bag that this was in fact a joke, that it was a satire. We wanted people to think like, why does Weird Al Yankovic have his own biopic? And then halfway through they go, oh, it's a parody of biopics. So we just wanted to ramp it up, and little by little have people realize that we were taking some creative liberties with the movie.
In the process of writing the film, did you end up watching a lot of biopics to understand and capture all the tropes and develop inspirations?
Yeah, Eric and I both did a bit of research, and we looked at a lot of rock biopics and a lot of non-rock biopics as well. And most of them have the same tropes. I mean, the bones are all there. They're maddeningly similar, a lot of these movies, which made it a lot easier to poke fun at them. For instance, my actual childhood was very happy. I had very supportive parents, but that doesn't really fly in a Hollywood biopic, because 98% of music biopics have either parents that are cruel, or they don't understand, or certainly not supportive, loving parents. So we had to change the characters of my parents, and build the stakes that way. That I'm always looking for my father's love and appreciation. So that was sort of like the stakes that we kind of had to keep throughout the movie.
One idea that is prominent in the film that I don't believe was in the trailer is the Pablo Escobar subplot. Where did that idea come from? Just to kind of go off there.
That came from me. Now, the original Funny or Die trailer came out in 2010, and it existed just as a viral video for close to a decade. And it was something that I played in my live shows during our costume changes. We'd have some video on the big screen, and it always went over great. People loved it, and a lot of the time after a show, people would come up to me and say, "When is the movie coming out?" and be all excited. And I have to say, no, it's just a gag. But about 2019, Bohemian Rhapsody had come out, won a bunch of awards. And I'm a big Queen fan, but it bugged me that they took so many liberties with the chronology and facts, and they just moved things around because that's kind of what you do in a Hollywood biopic. But I thought, well, maybe there is room for a Weird Al biopic where we just throw facts out the window. We seem to be living in a post-fact age. So I thought, now would be the time to just really go off the rails. So that was my pitch to Eric. I emailed him and I said, let's do it like the movie version of the Funny or Die trailer, but it's just got to go way, way, way off the rail. By the end of the second act, I want to be single-handedly battling a Colombian drug cartel. I want to basically be John Wick in a Hawaiian shirt, I think is what I said. And Eric was very much into it. So that was sort of our goal. We wanted to start off, fairly normal and just slowly ramp up and get to a point where it's just completely crazy.
And Daniel Radcliffe plays you in the film. Did you have him or anyone else in mind, as you were writing the film, or did that casting come about later?
I think that came about later. We didn't really have anybody in mind as we were writing, but once Eric and I started making our short list of actors, Daniel was certainly on that list, and that was the name that we kept coming back to because we both really loved his energy, the fact that he is great at comedy. He's a big comedy fan, pulls that off very well, but at the same time, he is great at doing extremely serious dramatic moments. And we need, like I said, we need both because it's a comedy movie, but we need to really hit those dramatic beats hard. And we knew that Daniel would nail it, and he certainly did.
Now with a film with so many gags and jokes and elements throughout, was there anything that you sort of wanted to do in the film that you couldn't quite accommodate, or that wouldn't quite fit, or maybe you didn't have time for that had to be left out?
There were a few things. I went back fairly recently and read the first completed draft of the script, and we didn't change a whole lot. There were just a few things that we had to take out for budget reasons. I think the budget was around $8 million. We had to shoot it in 18 days because of that. And we kind of looked at the script and said, how are we going to shoot this in 18 days? So the first thing that went was the Weird Al and Madonna getting to know you montage. We did like the stereotypical like dating kind of montage with a bunch of gags, and which would have been like 10 different locations and would have taken a few days. So that was the first thing that went. So little things like that. I think we had little budget things, like I think when Daniel as me goes to open the door in his mansion, he drives like a golf cart down the stairs, and like, we don't need the golf cart, I guess. So we just kind of tightened it up, and we just made a few changes here and there to be able to feasibly shoot our movie in 18 days. But the overall arcs and the main set pieces were always there pretty much from the first draft.
The film is nominated for a Writers Guild Award and won a couple of Critics' Choice Awards. It's been getting recognized elsewhere. Did you imagine when making the film that it might end up being an awards contender like the biopics that it's parodying?
No, I mean, obviously we hoped that people would respond to it positively, but Eric and I were just doing it because it was a dream project for both of us, and we really wanted to see it just the fact that it got made is the thing for us. We didn't think that our movie ostensibly making fun of awards show movies was going to actually be picking up awards, but we're thrilled, absolutely thrilled that it is.
And how different is writing film versus writing music? Like, do they come from very different parts of your creative brain?
In a sense, I mean, I like to think that my sensibility, my comedic sensibility, remains the same no matter what I'm doing. I think the same things are funny, but obviously, when you're doing a long form project like a feature film, I mean, you're dealing with characters and plot and things that you wouldn't do in like in a 3-minute song, for example. So it is a different part of your brain, to be sure, and it certainly was very helpful to partner with Eric on it, because we got to throw ideas back and forth, and we made we made each other better and funnier. I think it was. I think that the script is much better than what could have been done if either one of us had written it unilaterally. We punched each other up, and we think the same things are funny, which is very important when you're a writing team. We didn't have to talk each other out of gags because we both like the same thing more or less. I mean, our disagreements were minute. I mean, just little shades of gray, like here and there, where I'd want to go broader and he'd want to keep it more grounded. But it was really all just fine tuning. I mean, it's helpful when you're writing with somebody who is on the same wavelength as you.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your work on the film and the recognition it's been getting. It's been a pleasure chatting with you about it.
Thanks so much.
Jen Statsky, you're one of the co-creators, producers, and writers of the comedy series Hacks, about the partnership between a veteran comic and a young writer. Is there a lot of pressure as a TV writer to write a show that's in large part about the writing process?
There is, yeah, because we're very aware in writing it that we should know this better than anyone. We should know how these characters speak and act, because it is our lives as well, and also that our peers will be watching the show, hopefully, and they'll also be very aware of what's real and anything that would feel false. So it's definitely something we take seriously to try to get right. At the same time, it's also, I've found, having written other shows not about comedians or comedy writers, it's nice to know that they can kind of speak in jokes more naturally than, say, other types of people would on screen, because that is their language, that is their profession and how they kind of move through the world. So in that way, it's also like a little bit of a cheat code, because these characters get to be super funny and say things like that. And you're not like, oh, would someone speak in that perfectly crafted joke perfectly on our best day? And it's a little bit easier because a comedian or comedy writer can naturally speak like that.
And is the process of writing the show similar to at all how Deborah and Ava write? Does sort of what goes on in the writer's room inform what goes on in the show?
Yeah.
Besides the lawsuit.
No, including the lawsuit. No, it's really accurate. I mean, this show is created by myself and Lucia Agnello and Paul W. Downs, and it's very much so about the kind of love language that is a creative collaboration. That is what you see on screen with Deborah and Ava, and also what we have off screen. Obviously, their relationship is a little more complicated and fraught, but it's a lot of, that was something we were very committed to getting right, because as you said, comedy writers and people like that would know if it was false. And so, yeah, I think we take a lot of how our working relationship is and inject it into the characters and the way they speak and how they kind of go about doing the work.
And you won the Writers Guild Award last year for Best Comedy Series. Is the recognition from the WGA especially meaningful given the subject matter of the show?
Yeah, it's super, super meaningful. Like to win Best Comedy Series and New Series was like, I mean, for me, honestly, like as someone who grew up wanting to be a comedy writer and TV writer, like that was kind of a life highlight for sure, because it does just mean so much to be recognized by your peers and other writers. And, writers are the most critical for good reason. Like, we know how hard it is and to craft it, and we know when things are false and don't necessarily work. And so, yeah, it was incredibly meaningful to get those awards last year.
In writing a show about stand-up comedy, especially as Deborah is working to refine her new material in season 2, did you write, fuller routines for Deborah, or do you just write the parts that we see in of her act along the way?
We don't write like from start to finish the act and then just use parts of it, but we do kind of pour over those specific moments and jokes, and we write hundreds of like alts for each joke. So we really want to try to get that right. And so we do like spend a lot of time crafting her stand-up, especially last year as she was going out on the road. We wanted it to feel really authentic of like where a joke starts and how rough it starts, and then how it evolves throughout the process of touring. So we don't write from start to finish like the hour, but all in all of the stand-up jokes we've written for Deborah in total, we probably have a good 2-hour special ready to go. Which I think people would love to see Jean Smart do. So I should talk to her about that.
Absolutely, yeah. And the relationship between Ava and Deborah is so much the heart of the show, and it's always been, tumultuous too, at times. How did you decide, as writers, what the direction of that partnership would take in the wake of that email that sort of blew up their relationship in season 2?
Yeah, I mean, we knew it would be this, massive fracture in their relationship. And the goal of it was always, someone said, I think a therapy term, that conflict is intimacy. And I bought into that very hard, which is that, in relationships, if you never fight and it's always good and it's you're never getting into the nitty gritty and getting kind of real with each other and having these issues, it's not as intimate and deep as a bond as it could be. And so the goal for this email and how it blows up was to deepen their relationship. We knew it would separate them for a while, and Ava would have to work her way back into Deborah's good graces and the lawsuit and such. But in the end, we felt that them being able to work through this and still be together at the end of it would mean that their relationship had deepened and was actually richer and more like rewarding for the both of them and for the audience to watch, hopefully.
And how did going on the road in that tour bus, with the characters, sort of affect your approach to the story and character dynamics?
I think it was really fun because we got to have that kind of classic Deborah Ava dynamic, but we also got to a little bit, in season 1, Ava's the fish out of water because she's coming into Deborah's ecosystem in Las Vegas. And then in season 2, we kind of get to make Deborah the fish out of water too, because she's going to all these places that she hasn't been to in a long time. She's going to a state fair where there's a calf birth. She's going to a dirty dive bar on the road. Like, that was really fun for us to put Deborah in places that she hadn't been in quite a long time, because she has, built up this kind of castle in Las Vegas where she was very protected. And it's just kind of a classic, there's so many road trip movies, so many things like Midnight Run and stuff like that, where these characters are on the road, kind of them against the world, that is just like gives you so many fun opportunities for comedy and stuff. So we were super excited to do that.
It also gave you the opportunity to write new characters along the way for actors like Harriet Sansom Harris and Laurie Metcalf. How invigorating is it to be able to write for comic voices like that?
It's amazing. I mean, we both those parts, we were so incredibly lucky to get the tremendous actors that we did. It's really fun. Like we feel really blessed because we have this amazing core cast where everyone is amazing, and then we get to bring in these like people for a few episodes at a time. And yeah, it was just they elevate the material so much. Like, we wrote that part for Laurie Metcalf praying that she would do it, and she did, and it was like a million times funnier than I could have ever imagined. And same with Harriet Sansom Harris, it's such a wonderful, heartbreaking part that we were, that was one of my favorite, as we were blue skying at the beginning of the season and kind of breaking things. That was one of my favorite, that scene where she talks about quitting comedy at the picnic tables at the state fair. I was like, this is one of my favorite scenes we've ever done. And sometimes when you write that and you have really high expectations and you're like, I hope it is good, I hope it works out. And then she just knocked out of the park and made it so much better than I even imagined. So yeah, we just feel incredibly lucky to get to work with the amazing actors we do.
And season 2 ended in a way that sets up, another big shift in the characters and relationships. Did you already have ideas for how season 3 would take shape while you were working on season 2, or is that something that developed after while you were working on?
We did. We really like to kind of, as I'm sure a lot of writers do, like get our tent poles set up first, so we know where the season is starting, and then we have to know what's happening in the finale and like what we're building to in the Deborah and Ava relationship. So we knew always at the start of season 2 where we were headed in terms of where it would end, and then naturally you just start thinking and talking about, okay, so then where would we have to go from there? So very early on we knew what would be happening at the end, and we're kind of building towards that, and then had our idea for season 3. When we pitched the show, and we've said this before, but when we pitched the show, we kind of pitched out the full arc of the series and where it would end. So we kind of have these tentpoles set and know where we're going for as long as we do it.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your continued success on the show. Congratulations on the Writers Guild nominations again. And thank you so much for talking to me about it.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Daniel Montgomery here for our Meet the Experts Writers Guild nominees panel with Sharon Horgan from Bad Sisters, Jen Statsky from Hacks, Dan Erickson from Severance, Antonio Campos from The Staircase, and Al Yankovic from Weird, the Al Yankovic Story. I thought I'd start by asking a little about process. Do you have any habits or rituals that put you in an ideal creative space for writing? Let's start with Jen.
I mean, in a writer's room, not as much. I think for me personally, like when I'm off on draft and writing by myself, I do write in bed because I need maximum comfort, because it's really scary and I don't like it. So that some people think that's strange, but I'm a bed writer only, pretty much.
I'm a bed writer.
Okay, cool. Yeah, good. See, it works. It works.
Dan?
I'm an occasional bed writer. I dabble, but for the most part, I'm like a coffee shop writer, or sometimes a bar writer, which is less healthy. But I sort of need the noise, like the when it's too quiet, it's like the weight of all my insecurities starts to really rear its head. So I mean, I think I'm that obnoxious guy who's always like on final draft at a coffee shop, and I think Family Guy did a bit about that. Like, oh, if no one's watching you write, are you even a writer? But it's more about the noise for me, I like to think.
I used to do that. I wrote a lot in cafes and bars when I was making Divorce, but I think I just didn't. I was on my own, and also it's great for making you not open mail online or Twitter, because people are watching, and so. But yeah,
I can't watch YouTube because it's too noisy, and that's actually a big help.
Antonio?
I'm not a bed writer. I was going to say bed writer, but I'm not a bed writer. When I've done it, it's always been like, oh, this is nice, I should do this more. But I end up, no, I like having my be in my space. I tend to over organize everything around my desk for as long as possible before I actually start writing. But the thing that always has been really important to me is running. Like, running to me is kind of a key to just getting my head clear. And when I'm stuck, when I run and I listen to music, it triggers something. It opens me up in a way. And I've had a lot of, I think, my best ideas running. And so for me, running and writing are kind of, they go together.
Al?
I can write whenever or wherever I need to, but I think my best ideas, my most productive time is the middle of the night, like right before I fall asleep. Like even if I'm drowsy, something about the way my brain works in that state, I don't know, but I come up with my most bizarre ideas and some of my best ideas. In fact, for many years, I would keep a notepad by my bed, and now a laptop by my bed, because I'd be like just drifting off, and all of a sudden, oh, that's really funny. I got to write that down. And I've tried before where I think, oh, I'll remember it in the morning, and that never works. So as soon as I have an idea, I make sure it's documented somewhere.
I feel like that's
Sharon,
become the notes app for me. I feel like the notes app is this thing that like
Yeah.
now has become a key to my writing process. I just like fill that thing up with like endless amounts of notes and then try to organize it.
Mhm. I'll text stuff to myself too, which is why I should just use notes, but I'll like text stuff to myself.
One time I left myself, one time I was on my phone, I was checking my voicemail and I got a voicemail, and in the message, it was this person just telling me their ideas and what I had to do. And I was like, who is this asshole telling me this? And I realized, oh, it's me. I called myself. Remind me.
That's a Fight Club twist.
Yeah, so that is Fight Club.
And Sharon, you mentioned you're a bed writer. Is there anything else that puts you in that writing headspace?
No, I don't know. I don't know how to get in a writing headspace. I start very early in the morning. I drop my kid off and then I just start. That seems to work for me. I think my process has changed a lot over the years. I kind of write really quick first drafts now and then just send them to anyone who'll read them, and just like kind of get it down and ask those smart people how to make it better. That's my process.
And television is such a collaborative medium overall. How much do you like that collaborative process with other writers and a writer's room compared to, situations where you've, been writing solo? Antonio?
With this project, it was really key because I'd been with The Staircase on my own, going crazy for a very long time, and so it was great to watch other people become obsessed with it, and it sort of like poison everybody else in the room and sort of become their sort of the thing they can't stop thinking about. So I really enjoyed that space, and I had been for the most part been doing sort of partnering and co-writing stuff, and most recently I just started to write something on my own again with just me by myself in a room. And I started to enjoy that process. I think I was scared of that for a while, and now I feel like I can jump between the sort of co-writing situation with one person, the sort of big group writer's room thing, and then being on my own. But it took me a while to get there.
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, it's scary. It's scary. It's really vulnerable. Like I had been working on Severance for a while on my own, and sort of breaking the season a little bit on my own before we actually got the writers' room together. And it is like, and I've worked with such brilliant, funny, interesting people with great ideas, but there's still, it's like, you'll be in the room and somebody will say, it's like, well, what if Helly said this? And I'm like, no, that's like you get defensive, like it's your child or something. And it is, there's also a little bit of an element of like, to me, it's easier to like be off on my own, just in my own head, and let the ideas come as they will, as opposed to there's almost a performative element to being like in a writer's room where it's like everyone's trying to come up with something, and we know that we have to leave by 5, so you're trying to do it quickly. So it's hard, and I would be lying if I said I always love it, because it's like, it is just vulnerable and a little scary, but that's also where so many of the best ideas come from. So you take the difficult part of it with the beneficial part.
Sharon?
You say Jen? You say Jen? Oh, Sharon.
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 Who'd you
Sharon.
say? Sharon.
Sharon.
I really like it, but I'm the same. You know, I'm you know, when I'm in a writer's room, I'm so grateful for everyone's brains and time, and you know, we do it less over here, so it's even more of a, you know, I'm even more astounded that it works, you know, because you know, it's sort of, well, relatively new over here. But then I also feel like, you know, sometimes I just want to bust out there and just go and do it. You know, like sometimes I kind of just want to, you know, take it all and run off. And I really just like writing in my bed, and you can't do that when you're in a writer's room. But like when I'd write with Rob, it was just the best, because it was the tiniest writer's room of all time. It was me and him and our writer's assistant, and that was the greatest. I never wanted to sort of jump out of that.
Jen?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything everyone's saying, I agree with it. It's this kind of interesting process where sometimes it's incredibly helpful to have a bunch of brains around you, and then other times you just need to like narrow in. And you know, on Hacks we have 3 showrunners, so kind of the same as Sharon was saying with her and Rob. Like Paul Lucci and I, like sometimes we just need to go off and figure it out and do it, and then other times, you know, the room is so helpful. And it's interesting. I've kind of had every version of it. I've been in rooms of like 14 people for one show, which is crazy, and then our room for Hacks is like 7 or 8 people. So it's really interesting the different ways a writer's room can go. But Sharon, do you guys over there think we're like babies because we can't do it alone? Is that
no, not really. I mean, we're the babies because we make, you know, 6.5 hours, or, you know, I still can't get my brain around. I know this
22 episodes. Yeah.
I mean, that just seems like,
yeah, the middle can be bad. That's how you can get your brain around it.
You know, Rob and I could do it, just the 2 of us, because there was only 6. So you know, I've just done well, not just done, but last year, you know, 10 hours, and you know, I mean, that would have taken way too long. And
how big was your room for Bad Sisters?
Yeah, I think it was about 8 or so, you know. Not everyone writing a script, you know, in the end, but yeah, about that. This time around we're much smaller. There's about 5 of us, I think. But you know, great script supervisor, great you know, producer in the room. It's all that really helps too.
And how's the collaboration process versus writing solo?
You know, I think we found the trick. I learned this from Tom Lennon, my friend, who also plays the accordion salesman in the movie. But he and his partner Robert Ben Garant wrote a screenwriting book, and there's just a 2-page chapter on how to write with a partner. And I thought it was amazing advice, because I'm used to writing on my own, and I don't like, you know, somebody looking over my shoulder while I'm writing. My first feature film that I wrote was in the 80s, and I wrote that with my manager. And it was the 2 of us sitting in a room for 6 months, and it was just not a very comfortable or fun experience. But the trick was, from Tom and Ben, is that you write the outline together. And we did that, and we kind of refined the outline as we were going around town pitching the movie. So we had the basic beats of the whole movie figured out. And then we just divided it up. We literally took the outline and divided it into 22 chunks. And I would write the first one, he'd write the next one, and we'd do every other one. So I'd send him a chunk, I'd email it to him, and he'd punch it up and send me the next one, and then I'd punch up his, and we'd do that. And we got to basically write together, but on our own. It was very comfortable. And by the time we finished the first draft of the script, it had already been rewritten like 22 times. So that was a fun and very doable way of working with a partner for me.
When I was doing the first season of Catastrophe with Rob was in the States, and I was in London, and we just had this sort of rolling sort of sweatshop of, like, we were just constantly, he would wake up and I would have written, you know, 3 scenes, and then I'd wake up and he'd have written the next bit. It was amazing. We got it done so fast.
Yeah.
But then we finally got together and read it, and it was not great. And only then when we were in the room, sort of, you know, rewriting it, because it's all the rewriting, isn't it? Rewriting it together that it got to place. But gosh,
I was gonna say, is that the key? You have a writer in every time zone, so it's
Yeah, yeah.
always happening.
Yeah. I just had the experience that I had never done this before, but it really worked. And maybe it was just because each person you work with is different and that process is different. But I just had this experience doing a feature, and we would meet twice a week for no more than like 3 hours. And it was the same days and the same times. And we outlined the script together, and we never worked separately. We only worked in these windows. And we outlined and boarded it on Miro, and we were doing it on Zoom. And then we went into final draft collab mode, and we would basically talk about what we were going to write. So you're going to write that, and we talk about that, and I write this, we talk about that. And then we would go off and just write the scenes, and then whoever finished first would read the other person. And then, we would just it was all real time. And it was the most seamless process I'd ever gone through, because you didn't have that time to get married to anything. You were just like real time shutting down somebody else's thing. I spoke with them waiting, a day, and be like, oh,
Yeah.
I love that. Why are you just shut it down right there, or they shut you down or whatever. And that worked well. So I don't know. I don't know if it'll work with someone else, but it worked well this last time.
Well, I want to congratulate all of you on your Writers Guild nominations, and congratulations on all the work you do. It's always a pleasure to talk to people who are making such a wide variety of work as you're all doing, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Nice
so
to
much.
meet you all.
Really fun.